So the expansion draft is tonight, even though thanks to Mr. Frank Saravalli on Twitter, we basically already know all of Seattle's picks aside from who they're taking from Detroit, funny enough. I was going to just upload my expansion draft review today before the actual expansion draft happened, since we basically already know their team, but I figured I'd wait it out. I'll do it tomorrow morning just so we know if there are any side deals and stuff like that, and I want it to be 100% accurate. So in the meantime, I have another mock draft for you guys. I just want to say I really do appreciate all the kind words and the support you guys showed on my Seattle expansion mock draft that I uploaded yesterday. You guys definitely made all the time and effort I put into that video worth it. Now today's mock draft is of course going to be a mock draft for the NHL entry draft and not the expansion draft. The entry draft is on July 23rd, so just a couple of days from now actually. And I want to start off by clarifying right away, these aren't necessarily my prospect rankings, it's what I think is actually going to happen. And I also do want to clarify that I am no expert when it comes to these draft prospects. There are many other channels out there that give a lot better insight into these guys than I do. Of course, my main focus is on players that are already in the NHL and stuff that's happening in the NHL. However, I still do really enjoy doing these mock drafts leading up to the draft every year. So with that being said, here is a look at the draft order. I'm only going to do the top 10 because again, I'm no expert when it comes to these prospects. Outside of like the top 10, 15, it gets a little bit foggy for me. Starting us off, first overall to the Buffalo Sabres. This should come as no surprise. I have them selecting defenseman Owen Power out of the University of Michigan. I really wanted to justify going with somebody else here just to be different because, I mean, Owen Power is kind of the consensus #1 overall pick. On basically every mock draft that I've seen up until this point, people have Owen Power going first overall to the Buffalo Sabres, and I mean, it's for good reason. I just couldn't justify going with somebody else here. Since it is the Buffalo Sabres drafting first overall, I won't say it's a 100% chance they go with Owen Power. There was some reports a couple of weeks ago connecting them to William Eklund, but I would still say it's like 80% chance they go with Owen Power and 20% chance they go with anybody else. And I definitely think Owen Power is the right pick first overall, especially in a draft where there's so much uncertainty. He's almost a surefire bet to at least be an above average top 4 defenseman in the NHL, and he's one of the prospects where we probably won't have to wait all that long to see him make the jump to the NHL. He's already got the size, 6'6", close to 215 pounds. He not only held his own for Team Canada in the World Championships, but he was a pivotal part in that team winning the gold medal. I think Owen Power would be able to make the jump to the NHL right away and play for Buffalo next season. However, I'm not sure that's going to happen because earlier this month in a Zoom call, Owen Power himself said that he's leaning towards going back to Michigan for another season. Maybe him saying that affects what Buffalo decides to do here, but I don't think it should. They should take Owen Power, and ultimately I think that's what's going to happen. Moving along now to the second overall pick, the Seattle Kraken selecting here. I feel like a lot of people are forgetting they're actually selecting second overall in the entry draft, and we're all tied up in how they could have such a good team right out of the gate from the expansion draft, and they're going to get a pretty damn good prospect right out of the gate as well. And here I have them taking Matty Beniers out of the University of Michigan, which should be a surprise to nobody. As a Red Wings fan, Matty Beniers is the prospect that I wanted Detroit to end up with the most out of this draft class. The Wings really don't have any good top-notch prospects at the center position. Unfortunately, after the draft lottery, my hopes of Detroit getting Beniers were kind of crushed because I really can't see a scenario where he falls out of the top 3. I'd honestly be surprised if he doesn't go second overall. Beniers may not have the extremely high-end offensive upside like some of the other players in this class like Kent Johnson, William Eklund, and even a guy like Dylan Genther, but the fact he's already at such a young age, a very responsible two-way centerman with a fantastic complete game, I think that's what makes him one of the most appealing prospects in this class. And to go along with that, he is certainly no slouch offensively. He scored at a point per game pace as a freshman this past season with Michigan. To me, best case scenario when it comes to Matty Beniers is he becomes a top line centerman at the NHL level who is very responsible defensively, and on top of that can get you 50 plus points in a season. And worst case scenario, I still think Beniers becomes a solid two-way middle six centerman that can chip in some offense here and there. I just really don't see a scenario where he doesn't at the very least become a useful and impactful NHL player. Next up, third overall, I have the Anaheim Ducks selecting William Eklund out of the Swedish Hockey League. In regards to his position, I know he plays a lot of center, but depending on where you look, he could either be listed as a winger or a centerman. I have him listed as a winger here because I believe he projects to be a winger at the NHL level. William Eklund is a prospect that I would be extremely happy with if he fell to the Red Wings at number 6. I just can't see it happening. Had a very good season in the Swedish Hockey League, scored at above a half point per game pace for an 18-year-old in a professional league. Those are some pretty impressive numbers. He definitely isn't regarded as just a playmaker or just a goal scorer. I would say he's just an overall offensive threat. He's a threat to pass. He's a threat to shoot. He plays with very good pace. I believe he's one of those players that would be able to drive the play from the wing as opposed to the center usually being the driver of play on a line. line. And when looking at various different scouting reports on William Eklund, one of the player comparables I seen come up multiple times was Henrik Zetterberg, and if you know me, that's my favorite player of all time, so I'm in. Moving on now to the 4th overall pick, I have the New Jersey Devils selecting defenseman Luke Hughes out of the US National Development Team. I mean, how could they not go with him here, right? Obviously, you have the connection between Jack and Luke Hughes, they're brothers. They've both expressed the fact that they'd love to play together and that there's an opportunity they could here with the Devils selecting 4th overall. Now, obviously, I don't just think the New Jersey Devils should draft Luke Hughes here because he's Jack's little brother. I mean, that's part of it, but Luke Hughes is in the conversation to go in this range. He is a top prospect in this class. Comparing Luke Hughes to his brother Quinn, it's easier to make that comparison than comparing Luke to Jack because Quinn and Luke are both defensemen. One area where Luke is definitely different than both of his brothers, Jack and Quinn, is he's a lot bigger than both of them. Funny enough, earlier in the month when Luke was asked what's the differences between his game and his brother Quinn's game, Luke Hughes replied, "One area we are pretty different is that I'm 6'2" and I can kill penalties." So I thought that was pretty funny. And when it comes to the type of style Luke Hughes plays, he's definitely very talented offensively. He's an extremely good skater. I think he has very high hockey IQ, but he does already have a pretty decent two-way game. I would say his defensive game is a lot more far along than Quinn's was heading into Quinn's draft year. And one other thing worth mentioning when it comes to Luke Hughes, he's one of the youngest players in this draft class. I believe if he was born like a week later, he would have been eligible for the 2022 draft instead of 2021. So the fact that he's one of the youngest players in the draft class and is still one of the most highly touted prospects in the class, I think is a very good sign. He still has so much room to grow. 5th overall, the Columbus Blue Jackets. I went back and forth on this one a lot. It took some time before I finally made my prediction, but I am going to go with defenseman Simon Edvinsson out of the Swedish Hockey League. Simon Edvinsson is a fascinating prospect. He's got great size at 6'4". He's a very, very good skater, has great puck skills. To me, Edvinsson has just the pure upside and the potential to maybe even be the best defenseman out of this draft class if he hits. The thing is, he is one of the more riskier picks, I would say, that are projected to go in the top 10 of this draft. He's still a pretty raw prospect. I would say we're like 2 to 3 years out from seeing him actually take on a full-time NHL role, if not more. Still has a lot of things to work on when it comes to the defensive aspect of his game, but again, just pure upside and potential. That makes him one of the top prospects in this class, and if he hits, he's gonna hit big. Moving on now to the 6th overall pick, I have the Detroit Red Wings selecting centerman Mason McTavish. He actually played this season over in Switzerland, I believe, because of course the OHL did not have a season. He put up some pretty solid numbers over there, actually had 11 points in 13 games, and if you want to look back to his stats in the OHL last season, 42 points in 57 games. Generally, I'm not somebody who thinks drafting by position is a good idea, especially when you're selecting in the top 10. Usually, I'm all for best prospect available. However, when it comes to this year's draft and so many of the prospects like outside of the top 3, top 4 are so close together, I really do think Detroit should go with a centerman here, a guy that actually projects to be a center in the NHL as well. The U18 tournament, I would definitely say, is something that really boosted McTavish's draft stock. He had a great showing, 11 points in 7 games. I believe he wore the C while Shane Wright was out as well. Mason McTavish is one of those players who never takes a shift off. He's extremely hardworking. He's a great net front player as well. He thrives in that area, finding rebounds, bouncing on loose pucks. And from watching the U18s and looking at various different scouting reports, he also has a very, very good shot as well. So to me, he's a very intriguing prospect, and ultimately who I think Detroit ends up taking with the 6th overall pick. Next up, we have the San Jose Sharks making the 7th overall selection. The Sharks are a team with a pretty lackluster prospect pool. I would definitely say it's in the bottom 10 of the league, maybe even the bottom 5. So they could definitely use a high-end prospect, and here I have them getting that in Kent Johnson, centerman out of the University of Michigan. Doesn't project to be a centerman at the NHL level, however, most likely going to be a winger. I think the Sharks would be extremely happy to get a prospect like Kent Johnson 7th overall. I honestly could see a scenario where Johnson goes anywhere in the 3 to 7 range. I would say he definitely has the potential to be the best forward to come out of this draft class. A ton of high-end offensive skill. He may be the most skilled player in the class. However, he's one of those boom or bust picks. I would say there's a little bit of risk involved drafting Kent Johnson, because if he doesn't develop into a top-line winger who can give you maybe 70 plus points in a season, then what else is he going to be? The question about Kent Johnson isn't his offensive talent or his offensive game, it's pretty much about everything else. So I'm definitely very interested to see where Kent Johnson ends up going. The reason I have him so low here at number 7 is because of how much uncertainty there is surrounding this draft class. I feel like teams are going to take the safer route more often than not. The 8th overall pick, the Los Angeles Kings, very well may have the best prospect pool in the entire league. Here I have them selecting goaltender Jesper Wallstedt. Now I'm sure you've heard me already say this on the channel before, I'm not a huge fan of using a high draft pick in the first round on a goaltender because the goalie position is just so unpredictable. However, Jesper Wallstedt seems like a can't-miss prospect. I could definitely see a scenario where he goes higher than 8th overall, but if he does indeed fall to 8, I can't really see the LA Kings passing up on him because, like I said, they do have one of the best prospect pools in the league, if not the best, but the one position they don't really have a top-notch prospect at is the goaltending position, so I think he would be a really logical pick here. Continuing on now, the 9th overall pick, the Vancouver Canucks, I have them selecting winger Dylan Guenther out of the Western Hockey League. In my first mock draft I did however many months ago, I believe I actually had Dylan Guenther going 3rd overall, so I think that kind of just shows you how wide open this draft really is and how unpredictable it can be. Similar to what I said about Kent Johnson falling to the Sharks, I feel like Vancouver would be very happy if Dylan Guenther fell into their laps at 9th overall. He's just an extremely dynamic offensive player on the wing. He lit up the Western Hockey League this past season, albeit a very small sample size, scored at a 2-point per game pace in just 12 games, and going back to the 2019-20 season, which wasn't even his draft year, he still scored at above a point per game pace in the Western Hockey League. Just has so much offensive upside, I can't see him falling out of the top 10. And now for the final pick of my mock draft, 10th overall to the Ottawa Senators, I have them going a little bit off the board here with Fyodor Svechkov. I really went back and forth here between him and Brandt Clarke, but I decided to go with Svechkov just because he seems like the safer pick in my opinion. Svechkov is advertised as a very good shutdown defensive centerman. He's always in the right position, and he's a guy that almost guarantees to project as a centerman at the NHL level. The questions about Svechkov are about his offensive game. Can he develop into a threat offensively at the next level? But to me, it's almost a guarantee he is at the very least an impactful NHL centerman in some capacity. It's similar to what I said about Matty Beniers at the start of the video. I definitely don't think Svechkov has the upside of a guy like Matty Beniers to be, number 1 center who can be good defensively and very good offensively as well. But to me, at the very least, worst case scenario for Svechkov is he's a bottom 6 shutdown centerman that you can trust in pretty much all situations. And best case scenario, well, that all comes down to how much of an offensive game he can develop. If he does, I could see him being a Philippe Deneau type of player where he's very good defensively and can still get you, close to 40 points in a season. A player like that in this year's draft, in my opinion, has a ton of value, and I've echoed this so many times throughout the video with how much uncertainty there is surrounding this draft, the lack of scouting, the lack of games for some prospects. I feel like drafting at the 10 spot, if a player's available where you almost know he's at least going to be useful at the NHL level, it's hard to pass up. So that is going to do it for my 2021 NHL entry mock draft. Again, like I said at the start of the video, I do not claim to be some expert when it comes to these prospects. I just do this for fun, and when it comes to this year's draft in particular, I do not expect to get a lot of these picks right. Outside of the top 2, it could go a lot of different ways. I'm really interested to hear your guys' thoughts though and what you think. Do you think Owen Power and Matt Beniers are guaranteed to go 1 and 2? Do you think we could see some surprises? And if your favorite team has a pick in the top 10, who do you want them to select, or who do you hope falls to your favorite team?